So there's a few things I want to say before we get into the list. First of all, I don't actually like tier lists. Just categorizing everything as being better than everything else. I don't think it's a very accurate or fair way of judging things. I don't know how you're supposed to compare some of these games. They've got such different gameplay, different lengths of play, different target audiences. Most of these definitely shouldn't be comparable. But I went and did it anyway. So I went about making this list in a few different ways. To say how I actually ranked these, I don't really know. It's a bit of a combination. Obviously there's a lot of it that's just my personal opinion and my personal experience with these games. Obviously if I had a better experience with it, it's going to rank high. If I had a worse experience, it'll rank lower. But I also wanted to add in the quality of the games to try and make it fair. That's a very difficult thing to do, to sort of blend them together. So this list isn't really anything. It's not a list of my favorites exactly, and it's not exactly a list of the quality. It's sort of a mix of the two. When there's a game that I didn't like, but it's a high quality, it's going to rank a little bit lower compared to a game that I did like, even if it wasn't very good. There are games on this list that I probably put too high and I probably put too low. Trying to compare over 1,000 games at once is very difficult and time-consuming. I think the way I feel about these games can also differ wildly. I think there are games that I've put in D that I could easily put in B, maybe, or the other way around, depending on how I feel on that day and how I've analyzed it, which certainly makes this list very useless. I don't think you should read too much into this list. It is mostly subjective. If a game is right next to a different game, it probably doesn't exactly mean that that game is better in any way. They're probably very close. There's a lot of games on this list that I really enjoy. Games are meant to be enjoyed, they're not made to be horrible. So you're going to find games that I still enjoy 500, 600 down the list. You'll find I have a very specific taste in games. There's a lot of very popular genres that I don't enjoy, and my favorite ones are probably not the most popular. I'm often criticized for my taste in video games, let's just say that. If someone can look at this list and find a new game to enjoy, that's great, but I don't think that's very likely. I think more likely this is something to laugh at and have fun with. I think people are going to look at this list and have a lot of questions. Maybe a lot of people can understand why Dark Souls 3 is at number 233. I don't think a lot of people are going to understand why I put Ratatouille directly above it. Am I actually saying that Ratatouille is better than Dark Souls 3? I don't think I'm brave enough to actually outright say that, but I kind of put that on the list like that, so I guess I am. The distinction is how I played some of these games and the experiences I had with them, which is why I've added further details about how I played these games, how much I've played these games, and how long ago I have. There are a lot of games that I have played that aren't on this list, mostly because I don't have hard facts about them, and that I can't tell them apart. There are some games that probably shouldn't be on this list, ones that I barely remember, ones that I had technical difficulties playing, and just had a bad experience the first time I played. I think there's a good reason to put these on this list. I can only really see it from my experience. And if I had a bad first experience, I'm going to see that as a bad game. It's not the fairest thing, but I think it's worth putting it out there. If a game has a bad first impression, and doesn't hook you on the game, that is a flaw against the game, in my opinion. Maybe it's not fair that my disc was scratched and the game didn't run. Maybe I shouldn't be judging it for that. That's why I've gone into this extra detail, to try and get some of that across. I want to stress that the position on this list does not actually dictate anything about the quality of the game. It is trying to be, but it is just my opinion. I think it can vary wildly. I don't judge anyone for enjoying the worst games in this list. I know people who enjoy Warlock Master of the Arcane. First off, to help you understand where I'm coming from, I made a list of my favorite genres, taken straight from Wikipedia. You'll see my favorite games are platformers and MMOs. You might think that's weird, you might not, that's where it is. There are games like shooters and fightings, which end up in B. They can be good, but I'm not exactly attached to the genre. You'll see there's a lot of popular genres that I don't like. I don't like horror, battle royale, tower defense, MOBA, real-time strategy, JRPG, exercise games. I've certainly enjoyed some games in those genres, but they're not generally for me. Ranking genres is really hard, by the way. Okay, onto the list. First off, we're looking at S tier. Games like World of Warcraft and Minecraft tend to get up there by default, by being so large and massive, and so community focused, that they've had such a large impact on me. You're gonna find the opposite too, shorter games that are up here that had a small, focused impact. You'll also see a prevalence in platformers at this end of the list. S tier is what I'm defining as an almost perfect game, essentially. The A is what I would generally define as a very good game. Games that are very good, that are almost classics, but not quite. B tier is what I would define as pretty good games. Games that are above average, but don't really have that extra pull to make them amazing. Obviously, there's problems with games on this list. Some of them maybe shouldn't be here. Turns out this is a hard job. C tier. C plus is going to be a bit different to like C and C minus. The middle of C, you're going to see a lot of middling games. Games that weren't great but weren't really bad in any way. Or games that were kind of good but also had a little bit of bad in them. I can't be very specific, that's just the nature of this. Obviously there's a lot of variation between individual games that determines how they're judged on this list. D tier is generally games that were almost okay, but had a few downsides to them. Games that I didn't quite like enough. Some of these games I definitely still do like, but they weren't great enough to play over and over again. Didn't really hit that same stride, weren't really the best games. E, these are games that I would describe as very bad. Games that had a lot of things working against them. Games that I just couldn't really get into personally. Some games on here that I still do enjoy, but had a lot of different flaws that really impacted the overall quality of the game. And obviously there's some games on here that I just assume had a lot of flaws and didn't really play. F tier is the smallest tier, but these are games that I would generally classify as complete failures or close to that. Games that had numerous flaws and that I could never get into and really don't like. It feels a bit rough, but I think it's a fair assessment. That said, if you like any game on this F tier, that's okay. So that's the list. I'll put the list down in the comment description or whatever. I don't know. If you found anything funny about this list, let me know. I'm probably not going to update this list because it took ages to, but maybe I will in 20 years. I mostly just wanted to put this out there just to get some record of my experiences while I could still kind of remember a lot of these games.